Welcome to Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay, a shot of truth serum for your investment and insurance questions. I'm Josh Knoll, the owner of Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Jay Stubbs, Director of the Gulf Coast for Concourse Financial Group. We are brought to you on the Gulf Coast Financial Advisors Podcast Network. Jay, third part of a three-part mini-series where we're talking about the most current topics, and we are saying the heck with it. We're going to timestamp this thing all over the place because it's mid-June 2022. And there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of bad news. The market's down, inflation's up, stock market down, and the interest is up. It's a country song.
Definitely a country song.
We are living Hank Williams Jr. for sure. And so in our previous two episodes, we talked about the fear of missing out and what that is, what we feel that has maybe contributed to some of the boom and bust that we've been seeing in the market here recently. Of course, recently it's been more of a correction than the corresponding boom. The episode after that would have been contrasting bear and bull markets, talking about how people can potentially capitalize on a bear market and how that relates to the timing of a bull. This one, we're going to talk about inflation. We're going to talk about inflation, rising interest rates, what the Fed's trying to do, the impact of every day on the consumers. And this one's going to be a little bit more of a feeling out. I feel like the last two episodes, we had a point, we had some guidance or advice, if you will, at the end of it. I'm not going to say that we don't have some points or some guidance at the end of this one, but this one's going to be a little more open dialogue. And I'm actually, it's going to surprise you all, but maybe it's because I have an economics degree. I'm actually going to come from this as a little bit of a positive approach, because I do believe in supply and demand and how it can actually correct things over the long run. But before we get into all that, let's have our friends from Sloth Racer kick us off. All right, Jay, how you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing well, Josh. Here we are sitting in the studio recording some very valuable episodes for our listeners. All hundreds and thousands of them that are out there.
There's thousands.
Yeah, definitely thousands. We know those. It's good to be here in studio, deep fried. Good to see Johnny Gwynn, hear what's going on in Johnny's world, and good to be with you, Josh.
Yeah, same here, bud. So quick housekeeping for compliance. Jay Stubbs and Concourse Financial Group are not affiliated with Prime Capital Investment Advisors, Qualified Plan Advisors, or Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. And me, Josh Knoll, am not affiliated with Concourse Financial Group. So Jay, here's how I want to set the table today for our discussion about inflation. First, for the first time in many, many adults' lives, particularly anybody that's younger than us, inflation is kind of top of mind. You and I were both born in the mid-'70s, so when the last time that we experienced this kind of inflation, we were very young. I do remember my dad coming home one time and being ecstatic that he had gotten a construction loan. I'm probably going to butcher this number, Jay, but it was somewhere between 11 and 16%. And he was very, very happy that he got it done at that rate.
Right.
And, at the time I thought, well, that's normal. And then as years went on, you realize like, holy cow, that's a huge number. So the point of that is the first time in many investors' lives and many adults' lives, we're dealing with this ugly beast of inflation that's reared its head. And so what we want to do today is kind of break that beast down into some individual parts. There's going to be some things that are probably not the happiest that we have to talk about, but there's also going to be some things that I think will be somewhat surprising. Again, coming from an economics background that I do have somewhat of a glass half full thing to say about some things. As we dive into this, Jay, what's your personal experience of inflation? How's that affecting the Stubbs household? What do you got going on?
Well, Josh, I appreciate you asking me the question. We've been in our house for nearly 20 years, and we've decided 2 years ago that we wanted to redo some things, like add a half bath so you didn't have to go to the bathroom in my bathroom when you came over to visit. Get my twin daughters a little extra space in their closet because they're just doing nothing but growing up and out. And then redo the kitchen. And comes with that, when you make those decisions, you got to evaluate the prices of things. We've seen a significant increase in the price of labor. We've seen a significant increase in the price of lumber that's needed to redo some of the interior and exterior. We've seen an increase in the appliance costs that are going into the kitchen. Fortunately for my wife and I, we were able to get those things 18 months ago, and they're kind of sitting there in a holding pattern until we finish with the construction. That all being said, we have personally seen it. I bet others listening to this, when they've gone out to do either the weekend project or the afternoon project or a major type of project, they have seen higher costs of things, whether it's getting the plumber or the electrician or the air conditioner repair people to come by and help you out. Hourly rates have gone up, service calls have gone up, and just the everyday price of getting things done on a project have gone up. Couple that with with what we've seen in gas prices. Everybody knows the gas that's in the news. That's up. Whether you call that impact from Russia invading Ukraine or the United States and the current administration not putting as much effort and energy into our own natural energy resources here in the United States, whatever the case is, we're looking at average gas prices soaring, which is going to have a huge impact on that service industry, the travel industry, the warehousing, and getting goods from point A to point B, because those got to travel by train, truck, or boat somewhere, and that's fuel. Diesel prices up. So big project stuff, gas, and then everyday goods. We've seen the cost of eggs and milk and bread and even donuts and breakfast items at our fast food restaurants have gone up. It's not often that I log into the Chick-Fil-A app with my 4 kids who love Chick-fil-A, and I've seen the prices of certain things go up on the app. It's not in the news. We're not really noticing it, but you'll see something that might be up 10, 15 cents more than it was before. That's the inflation component, and we're definitely seeing it. I've never experienced it as strong as I have than this age. I don't remember a lot of significant. If you go back and say, what were you paying for things back when you were 18 versus when you're paying things for 45? Certainly prices of homes and cars and large ticket items, those items have gone up. Certain things that become a little less expensive to manufacture, like DVD players, TVs. Yeah, I mean, you could get a pretty reasonable TV for $100 now. Right. And, that type of TV 10, 15 years ago, maybe $500 or $1,000. So all they've done is maybe find a technological way to get us a better product. So we're going to pay more for maybe a better product. But if I just wanted to go grab a TV, I could get one for dirt cheap. All that is the inflation component. And I've never seen it as strong as I have today, June of 2022, especially in the last year. Right. I don't know if that's influx of a lot of cash that hit the markets during COVID and tried to lift, have a rising tide to lift up everybody and get them in a better financial position. But then, the flip side of the inflation, certain companies that we know of have said, hey, we're not going to rise the price. We're just not going to give you as much for your dollar anymore. And I find those kind of interesting. They call that shrink-flation,
Shrink-flation, yes.
I
learned something new today.
Candy bars going from a 200-gram bar to a 180-gram bar. Right. People like Kleenex saying, hey, we're not going to put 65 Kleenex tissues in the box, we're putting 60, and you're going to pay the same price. Pepsi coming out and saying that Frito, that party bag, is going from 18 ounces to 15 and a ounces. Gatorade going from a 32-ounce Gatorade bottle to a 28-ounce Gatorade bottle. And then Domino's, man, they came out and said, hey, our 10-piece wing at Domino's, which I don't even know who orders wings from Domino's, by the way, but 10-piece wing is now going to be a 8-piece wing. But you're going to pay the same price. So shrinkflation, inflation, everybody listening to this Every Dollar Counts episode, truly every dollar does count today, because we are seeing what we can get for the money that's in our wallets, what we can get for the money that's in our bank account, and are we getting a good value on that? And maybe, just maybe, we're going to find other just as good, maybe off-brand items and get the same kind of quality. We're just not paying for the brand.
Well, all right, so let's break that down, because you covered a lot of different things.
I did. Sorry, I went on a rampage.
No, it's okay. I like it. So the part of what is going on with the very recent market correction is the annual inflation rate came in May of 2022 at 8.6. So what does that mean? Well, one, the forecast was 8.3. So number one, I'll tell you, there's so many times I look at these guys that forecast this thing and I wonder why they even bother half the time. I know they have a job to do. I know there has to be something that kind of gives an idea where we're heading. It just always seems a little funny, dubious, if you will, when we're 0.3 off and it's like they missed it by 50% or something like that. But more importantly, to the point in there, as you were mentioning, Jay, energy prices rose 34.6.
The largest component of all of it.
Right. Gasoline rose 48.7. Right. Electricity, 12%. Let's see what else we got here. Cost of shelter, 5.5. Household furnishings and operations went up 8.9. Used cars and trucks, 16.1. Airline fares, 37.8. Okay. So that's the bad news. The good news, and what you don't hear, because it's hard to have a headline that reads this way, is if you strip out the two components out of that annual inflation rate, which will be energy and food price in a broad term, and you get down to what's called core inflation, that core inflation rate actually slowed its second month to 6%, and it was expected at 5.9, so it was pretty close, just like the other one. Now, A common sense person would say, why would you not include energy and food in core inflation? Well, because core inflation is intended to reflect the goods and services that don't have a tremendous amount of outside pressure on their pricing. What do I mean by that? Energy. Russia invades Ukraine. Energy prices go through the roof. Food. We have a drought in the West, or we have a drought in the Midwest. That directly affects it. Even the Ukraine thing with wheat exports, things like that. So that's why they keep it out of core inflation, because those things can tend to gyrate more than what they're actually looking for core inflation. So with that said, am I telling you that core inflation decreasing to 6% is a good thing? Not necessarily. But what I'm telling you, the thing that you have to remember, or I want you to know if you don't know this, and this comes from an economics background, is inflation is not the actual number that you're looking at. It's a measure of the change. So I'm going to repeat that. Inflation is a measure of the change, not necessarily directly correlated to the actual price you're seeing. Okay, Josh, make some sense here.
Well, we all want our portfolios to inflate
Right.
in value. We call that a rate of return.
Right, rate of return.
So
yeah, there's a difference.
Inflation is, if I hear you saying, it's the change above what it was. So if I used to pay something a dollar for something, and now I pay $1.10, I have inflated 10%. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. That's pretty
correct.
simple.
And the reason I mention that, Jay, is simply this. We are not in the forecasting business, nor should some of these guys that are in the forecasting business be. But for gasoline to go up 48.7% when they release the next inflation records, that means it's got to go up another $2 to $2.25 per gallon. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I don't think gas can't go higher. Maybe it will over a number of months. The point being is, pay attention to the rate of change. And don't be misled, because we may come in on an inflation rate on gasoline next month, and it may only increase 2% because maybe it levels off at $5 a gallon, right?
Right.
So you have to kind of take that all into consideration and look at the core inflation numbers, and then determine, hey, how is this actually directly affecting me? You just laid out kind of the case of how everything is affecting you directly as a consumer. I just laid out the numbers behind all of that. And it sounds like I'm, trying to put a spin on this from being pessimistic to optimistic. My point being is, don't be surprised if we see inflation actually level off a little bit over the next couple months, simply because with the Fed's action, as we're segueing to the next part of our topic, Jay, is the Fed's action of raising rates, which is intended to tamp down demand. You couple that with the fact that some of this stuff honestly is probably reaching a point for certain people, like you said, they start doing replacement. They start doing replacement things. So you not only have rate increase that decreases demand, but you also just have a natural supply and demand. The demand side comes down. Consequently, you start seeing the rate of higher prices pressure coming down on them. Does that mean we're out of the woods? No. But I just want to give some folks some context on that. Everybody wants to point to the 70s, stitching back what you and I said when we were young. The difference between now and the 70s is that we just did not have the flow of goods globally. We did not have the flow of financial information and money globally. We did not have all of this activity. We had stagflation because, quite honestly, once the U.S. economy ground to a halt or ground very slow, there was nothing else that picked us up. Now we are more of a services-based industry. We rely on the global chain all across our country for different goods and services, and in return, we also supply some of that. So there is just a significant amount more of flow of everything. So that is all a very fancy way of me saying to you, of hot potato and back to you, Jay, that yes, I'm alarmed by inflation. Yes, it's affecting me on a personal basis. But I think if you start stripping it out and you start understanding exactly what inflation is, you understand that some of this sometimes is defeat a narrative, because unfortunately we do live in a partisan society. And I think that some of this, not that it's been overblown, but strip out the things that you're seeing. And what Jay said, look at some of the things that we're all going to start replacing. The rate will go up. You'll see a decreased demand among homes, cars, things of that nature. And some of the stuff may work itself out without necessarily the Fed having to artificially force us into a recession. So there's my sunny side up, man. What do you say?
Sunny side up. And by the time this episode comes out, we'll know what the FOMC is going to do. They're meeting today and tomorrow. All the market and the smartest economists in the world gather together, and the smartest bankers. These people will help determine what the next interest rate increase will be. The markets were thinking it was going to be a 50 basis point increase. Now with inflation coming out at that 8.6 number that we saw, a lot of speculation that the FOMC is going to go 75, maybe even 100 basis points, which that has a drain on our different markets. And if you're wondering about those markets, bull and bear, and why we're in a bear, go listen to the previous episodes.
There you go.
But the FOMC and the Federal Reserve, they have the option of helping out on this in the best way they know possible. Hopefully, it doesn't get into politics. We can cast a lot of blame towards anybody or anything or any administration we want to, but I do think there is a light at the end of the tunnel with respect to prices of things. It's got to level out. We'll find a way to do that, and I think the FOMC, when they make their announcements over the next couple of days, they'll do so. And what do you want to have in your portfolio, or what do you want to have in your possession? And when we are in a rising interest rate, rising inflation environment, well, a lot of people say real estate. Real estate take a look at some of the real estate, some valuable properties, places that people find attractive, whether that's a home or a condo or anything. I'm not saying that you should go out and do it, but real estate typically does well. Art typically does well. Wine, jewelry, luxury watches, other commodities, even stocks, individual companies or valuable ETFs of companies that you believe in. Companies that you feel like are a good product or put out a good service and that will stand the test of time, those might be the things that we want to consider owning in an environment such as what we're in.
Jay, that actually leads me down a different segue than I intended to go, but you brought to mind, one of the things that you've got to look at is we take off our consumer hat and we put on our investor hat. And to be quite honest, Every Dollar Counts is really geared towards more the investor side. Consumer side, we tend to be like traditional financial planners. Hey, live within your means, spend less than you make, put it away, so on and so forth, right? So we always kind of come from that conservative bent, if you will. But if we put our investment hat on, if you are investing in certain industries right now, i.e. fuel, gas, oil, your portfolio is actually looking pretty decent.
Yeah.
Right. And then I will even go so far, and I don't think this will give me a headache with compliance. If it does, I apologize. We'll cut it. But, through my affiliation or through my use of Prime Capital Investment Advisors and their portfolios, we actually have a sector rotation strategy that's a momentum play that looks at what are the best performing parts of the market over the last 3 to 6 months. Hey, let's invest in those. Let's see how that goes over the next 3 to 6 months. As we just keep lathering, rinsing, and repeating, we're going to try to ride that momentum in some of the sectors that are doing very well. So just as you alluded to earlier, Jay, the thing that we're in right now with our sector rotation is fuel, and it's in not necessarily holding individual commodities, but it's in the precious metal production. And the portfolio, I won't give percentages on the air, but the portfolio has weathered the storm very well, right? So there's always ways to look at this, especially if you take off your consumer hat, which I know, folks. I mean, Jay and I both have multiple kids. We're raising a family. It sucks when you go buy groceries.
Oh my God.
It sucks when you fill up your gas and you always hit the level of the pump without actually filling your tank up.
Yeah, because why, Josh? Because every dollar counts, especially today. I don't know when we decided on the name of this podcast years and years ago with our thousands and thousands of listeners, but we are really on top of things today because every dollar does freaking count.
I love it. So what's the point here? As we said at the beginning of the episode, we weren't necessarily here to give you a solution. We were here to kind of lay out the fact that, hey, we are recognizing this. Here's the real numbers. Here's the breakdown of them. Here's what they mean. And then at least from my side of the thing, and I'll give Jay last word, is I just really cannot stress enough to folks to remember that inflation is a measure of change, that there is a supply and demand to this, that one of the things I didn't point out earlier, Jay, but I will now, is that income tends to lag inflation. So even though inflation went up 8.6%, that doesn't mean incomes rose 8.6 in May. So the point of that statement is if incomes stay relatively flat as we get these high inflation rates, that will automatically start pulling demand down. And there are ways, God help us, I'm with the government, I'm here to help, but there are ways where hopefully the guys that are hopefully brighter than us can navigate this to where if we do have a recession, it's mild, or potentially we can even let some of this stuff burn out, as my old banker used to call it, the great cleansing, to where prices kind of get back in line. And actually, Jay, I mean, this sounds old man judgmental, but demand gets back in line a little bit because quite honestly, people have bought a lot of stuff that they can't necessarily afford. And that sounds so judgmental. I'm sure I'm guilty of it too, but it's one of those things where maybe we did need to kind of take a step back, to be fair, to a certain degree.
And as the listeners may agree, things are getting expensive when we go shop for basic grocery items or whatever, clothing for the family, shoes, it doesn't matter. Consider shopping local.
Right. Bing.
And, the companies that are around that sell the goods at the lowest cost, absolutely. Might not be your neighbor. That might not be your business down the street. So just as we did maybe during at the beginning of the pandemic and everybody saying, hey, shop local, I'm going to encourage you to do that today. And as you start to consider, okay, I'm going to start pinching a few pennies because every dollar does count and I want to save a few bucks. But maybe if you can find a way to pay an extra 50 cents for something and buy it from somebody local as opposed or an extra $5 or $10, whatever it is you're looking for, consider shopping local as opposed to national companies that are going to be around regardless of what happens because they're built to survive this kind of thing.
Yep, that's a great point and a great way to end the show. So listeners, if you want to continue this conversation, you can reach out by calling 251-327-2124. Or you can visit gulfcoastfa.com. That's FA as in financial advisor. For all you independent and semi-independent advisors and agents out there hearing Jay and interested what he has to bring to the table, you can find him at jstubbs.com. That's JAYSTUBBS.com. All right, so Jay, my friend, another show in the can. Let's thank Johnny Gwynn, our producer down here in Deep Fry Studios, downtown Mobile, Alabama. Obviously, always many thanks to you for being here beside me hosting the show. And then, as always, a huge shout out to all of you that have joined Jay and I in this journey, and to those of you that are joining us now. Do me a favor, please subscribe on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And while you're there, you would be doing us a huge favor if you would rate and review the show. It helps other listeners like you find us. Lastly, if you like the show music, go check out slothracerband.com. That's slothracerband.com. And they're going to take us home now. This has been Every Dollar Counts with Josh and Jay. Advisory services offered through Prime Capital Investment Advisors, LLC, PCIA, a federally registered investment advisor. PCIA, doing business as Prime Capital Wealth Management, PCWM, and Qualified Plan Advisors, QPA. Gulf Coast Financial Advisors is independent of Prime Capital Advisors. Information presented is for educational purposes only, is not an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. All investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, be sure to consult a tax professional before implementing any tax or investment strategies.